Hi, Kevin Henry, the Group Editorial Director for Advanced Stars Dental Division, and I'm on a Google Hangout today with Mike Uritz, who is the founder of www.dentalsoftwareadvisor.com, and he's also the electronic health records editor for DPR and Advanced Star Dental. So, Mike, how you doing today?
Oh, real good, Kevin. Nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you as well. And, this article that you've written on EHRs being a team sport, and certainly wanted to get a little bit more meat from you to go along with the article. So you call this a team sport. Why do you call it that?
Well, it's interesting. I've been through a lot of EHR implementations, over the years. And really, with the electronic health record, it really touches upon every aspect of the practice. Everybody uses it. And so therefore, it's really important that folks get together when they're choosing and implementing an EHR, because they all should have a say really in how it works.
So when you talk about the team in this article, what different roles and functions are you really talking about?
Well, actually, it's pretty much all the roles. It's, of course, the dentist, it's the hygienist, the dental assistant, as well as front and back desk staff, and office managers, practice managers. So it really encompasses really every role you can think of in the practice.
So really you see EHRs as something that's being clinical and administrative, because I've always heard that, or thought at least, that EHRs would be much more clinical than administrative, but you don't see it that way, right?
Well, no, in fact, it's interesting because years and years ago when I first got into doing this with practices, I thought that exactly. I thought, it's clinical software, it's electronic health records, therefore it would just be the clinical providers that would be dealing with it. But really, as I got into working with practices, helping them select it, helping them implement it, what I found was that actually it crossed over to the administrative and practice management side. And actually there's a couple of reasons. One reason is features themselves. So for example, with electronic health records, you actually get codes that are passed through from the operatory, from the patient, that go into claims processing and come back. So therefore, in that case, it's really important that the people that do the billing understand how things are coming from the EHR. And there's some other examples, for example, scheduling. Okay, if you're scheduling certain things with patients from a clinical aspect, well, obviously it has to start with the schedule. So therefore, there are a lot of crossovers in terms of features. They cross over between the clinical EHR and also the traditional practice management system. Things like, for example, when we talk about the office manager, which you think would be more administrative, well, they might be interested in following workflow. There's a lot of very sophisticated features now in electronic health records, for example, task management. So an office manager might want to follow the clinical tasks that are being done in the practice. So that's available with some EHRs. So that's really the first part of it. Our features cross over between clinical and administrative. The second thing is very interesting, because I found in a lot of years of doing this that when people select electronic health records, you would think that if normally they're happy with their practice management system, they'll just get an electronic health record to augment it, and it might be a different company, and they'll interface with each other. Well, technology's changed quite a bit. So what you're seeing a lot of integrated technology. You're seeing basically the cliche is the one throat to choke when you talk about vendors. In other words, a vendor would have both a practice management system and an EHR that works together. So from my experience, I found that many times when practices look for electronic health records, they're also looking at the practice management system, and they're really opening their minds, saying to themselves, you know what, this might be a good time to switch practice management as well. So that's why administration does get involved many times with the selection of electronic health records.
In what areas of the practice's EHR transition do you feel like the entire team should be involved in?
Well, actually, I think really the two main ones. Okay, on the front end, when you select and evaluate electronic health records vendors and software, it's really important for the whole team to get involved with that process. And then, of course, on the back end, when you're actually implementing it in your practice, then the team should be involved as well. So there's actually two major touch points for the team to get involved.
And tell me about the team involvement in the whole selection process.
That's that's really interesting. So when you think about it, a lot of times people select electronic health records by either looking on the internet or getting recommendations from colleagues or things of that sort. Realistically, the process should be that the team gets together, they each look at their own needs, right? The hygienists are going to look at electronic health record. What do they need out of it? The dentist needs certain things out of it. The assistants need certain things. And as I just alluded to, administrative people, front, back desk, back office personnel, office managers, practice managers, they have certain needs too. So really, in terms of selection, they need to take their needs into account and then together develop a needs list. So when you go to the electronic health record vendor, you can actually approach them and say, look, we want your software to successfully do A, B, C, D, and E. So really the whole team gets their needs met. So that's the whole concept of the team approach to electronic health record selection. Now, once you have that, the next step is to actually turn that information, those needs, into a document that you can give a vendor. So all along the way, each role is looking at their interests to make sure that the whole is met when you get your new electronic health record system.
So obviously the team's very involved as far as the selection goes, but it's just as important in the implementation process as well, right?
Right. I think what happens is a lot of times people think, I'm paying a lot of money for this software system, and the vendor's just going to swoop in, they're going to implement it, everything's going to be fine. And that would be a great world if it worked that way. Unfortunately, it really is a partnership between your vendor and your team in terms of implementing it. Your clinical folks have to do things like templates and other features. They have to put information in from a clinical aspect. Your administrative people have to enter all their billing type of information. So really, when you talk about implementation, everybody really needs to be involved in the implementation to make sure, again, that their part goes smoothly. So the team approach to implementation is really important. If they're not involved, it probably won't be as successful as it should be.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because the one thing I've heard you say and I've read in this article is the importance of the team being involved. Can you give me an example of what's happened whenever a team wasn't involved as far as this whole process goes?
Well, I'll tell you one of the extreme examples I ran across. A number of years ago, I actually was involved with a fairly large practice, and we were very successful at getting, got a good EHR. Everything was fine. We went into the implementation, and somehow there were some people that were just complaining that things weren't working right. They didn't like the software. It was just really a bad situation because there were 2 or 3 folks in the practice that just every time we take 1 step forward, we would go 2 steps backward because of all the complaints, and they didn't want to get, well, what we found out was that they weren't involved from the beginning, so they were a little upset that their needs weren't taken into consideration. So in terms of that, that was, I don't know if you want to talk about the term sabotage, maybe that's a strong word, but if people aren't involved and don't feel empowered to be involved with the selection of what they're going to use, sometimes there'll be bad feelings, and it could actually, quote, sabotage the project. So that's one situation. I've been in a lot of situations, though, where the person owning the practice would be the one making the decisions. And as you know, that doesn't necessarily work too well because, again, each person's needs aren't taken into account. So, for example, can a dentist making all the decisions truly understand how a hygienist is going to use that EHR? Or conversely, can the hygienist really understand what a biller's needs are? So really, I've been in a lot of situations where, out of a practice where maybe a small amount, 1, 2, 3 people make the ultimate decisions, and the other people don't have much say. So really, it goes back to what I was saying before. Everybody's needs have to be taken into account. It's an important decision. It's going to change your practice. And so really, everybody needs to have their say.
Mike, as always, I really appreciate your insight and your time, and certainly encourage people to read the article and get back in touch with you with any questions that they have.
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate it, Kevin.
All right. Take care, Mike.
Thanks.